I'm a model maker.
I'm Chris Bentley, from Bradford, and I'm the chairman of Fanderson.
Hello, my name's Martin Gainsford. I'm a huge Jerry Anderson fan and collector, and I live with Melody Angel. Jerry Anderson was, and probably is, England's most foremost maker of science fiction adventure TV series. He formed a company in the mid-50s, not too successfully, I'm sure he would be the first to admit, when he was approached to make some children's puppet programs.
It wasn't really what he wanted to do. He was hoping that once people saw that he could make decent television programs, they'd come offering him big feature films to do. But unfortunately, he found himself in the niche.
He wanted to be James Bond, and he found himself doing Andy Pandy. So he was really upset. So what he did is he pushed the whole process. He pushed the puppets, he pushed the special effects and music. And 10 years later he was doing Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, these big adventure shows. And he effectively did these action films through the medium of a kids' television program.
Thunderbirds are go!
I grew up in the 60s, and every time you watch TV, there's like an astronaut getting into a rocket and blasting off to the moon, the great space race. So that really got my imagination going. And I looked on the TV for anything that was like that. And the first program that I ever remember watching was Fireball XL5.
Kids was mostly used to watching stuff like Andy Pandy, etc., etc. And all of a sudden there was puppets, if you like, but fantastically handsome-looking chaps and beautiful women in these wonderful vehicles that zoomed around having these wonderful adventures.
The UFO was the first program that captured my interest. Having seen it as an adult, I can appreciate that there must have been so much of it that just went completely over my head. I was only interested in it as a kid for the models and the explosions and gunfire and aliens and spaceships and things like that.
He mixes characters with machines a lot. The machines are as important as the characters. And in a lot of science fiction shows, it's always characters, machines are very little. They're hardly in it. Whereas Jerry Anderson is literally using them as the virtual stars of the show.
Having vehicles was one of the answers to one of the problems that Jerry Anderson had, was the fact of getting the characters to walk. And they could never quite make the characters walk properly.
So the puppets would sit in a chair and they'd pull a lever, and their chair would move, or the console would move, or the floor moves, or the entire building moves. Everything moves in a Jerry Anderson show except the characters.
Supermarionation was a term coined by Jerry Anderson and his team to describe the puppetry that he used in the television series.
It basically involved taking regular string puppets and putting mechanisms inside their heads so that their mouth movements coincided with the dialogue pre-recorded by the actors. Obviously the word marionette was sort of part of the word marionation. Asian being from animation because the characters were animated. And obviously they threw the word super onto the start of it because he thought it was super.
Fantastic!
The basic premise of Thunderbirds is quite simple, really. Disasters happen in the world, and there's a secret organisation called International Rescue who have 5 incredible Thunderbirds vehicles that they can go out to save people in danger.
Thunderbirds was full of a cast of characters that everybody remembers to this day. You had Jeff Tracy, ex-astronaut, multi-millionaire, with a secret base, who had 5 ridiculously handsome sons, but who all looked ridiculously, I feel, different from each other. But I think that's probably so that a little boy, regardless of his hair colour, could relate to a particular brother.
5.
Thunderbird 5 was the space satellite which took in the incoming calls of distress. That was banned by John Tracy.
He was so ugly that they put him in a space station and no one ever talked to him for years.
4.
Thunderbird 4 is a submarine for any situation involving some problem deep in the sea.
3.
And then you get Alan, who's sort of supposed to be the good-looking one, sort of the world-renowned racing driver. And I always thought that was rather stupid because they're supposed to be incognito. And this guy's supposed to be famous as Nigel Mansell, and yet no one ever recognised him.
2.
Thunderbird 2 is a big mobile transport vehicle that ferries the essential equipment to the danger zone to help out.
1.
And you had Thunderbird 1, possibly the coolest of all the Thunderbird vehicles, piloted by possibly the coolest of the brothers, Sean Connery lookalike, Scott Tracy.
Leave this to me.
And they also have the London agent Lady Penelope and her manservant Parker.
Yes, the lady.
I think the scriptwriters had a bit of a problem trying to find out how to put them into the episodes. So they sort of have to shove them into various episodes because they really turned out to be the stars of the show.
Jeff, you know how badly I want to go out on a rescue.
Yeah, but this one's too dangerous.
Jerry Anderson was very fortunate in that he surrounded himself and built up around himself a team of incredibly talented people.
I think probably one of the aspects of the programs that helps to make them timeless is the quality of the music that was written for the various series. The composer Barry Gray used full orchestral scores in the incidental music for most of the program.
You watch Thunderbird, the puppet's sitting there waving its arms out, and it's trying to rescue another puppet that's waving its arms about, and the models are wobbling, and it shouldn't really work, but then this big orchestral important music comes on, and the show just comes alive.
Probably the most famous of all people was Derek Meddings, who sadly died very recently. But he was the technical effects, special effects and miniature wizard, if you like. He designed, along with a chap called Mike Trim, the bulk of the vehicles in all of the programs. And virtually when the Century 21 studios sort of disintegrated in the early 70s, Derek and most of his team pretty much went lock, stock and barrel to the Cubby Broccoli stables to do a lot of the Roger Moore Bond films.
These programs were written by some of the top writers who were working in television at the time, who had written for perfectly accepted British drama series like The Saint. Jerry Anderson always encouraged his writers and everybody that was working on the team not to talk down to children, to present it as though it was a straightforward dramatic presentation for a family audience.
Following on from Thunderbirds, Jerry Anderson and his team made Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. Soon after that, he went into live action with UFO, which is regarded certainly by myself and by many, many people as possibly one of the best science fiction programs ever.
Thanks.
Jerry Anderson shows have a real variety, and basically it's just a secret organisation or a military organisation that's fighting some alien threat or whatever.
UFO is about a secret organisation called Shadow, and they're defending the Earth from alien invaders who are coming to capture humans and take them home to use their body parts in transplant surgery.
And then Space 1999, which has got a huge, huge following within Fanderson as a club and also within science fiction circles in general.
I became involved in Fanderson, the official Jerry Anderson Appreciation Society, in 1991.
There was a newsletter-style publication which went out, as well as a magazine called SIG.
As a member of the club myself for a couple of years, I'd become very much aware that the quality of the product that they were producing, I felt was disappointing.
They were initially quite fanzine-ish, and without being disrespectful, sort of amateurish, but full of enthusiasm.
So I felt that I had something that I could really contribute as a graphic designer to produce a much better quality club magazine. And so I became chairman of Fanderson and also the editor of the club magazine, which we started afresh, as it were, and relaunched as FAB, F-A-B. I'd like to think of the primary function of the club as being one of archiving the material. We know from just during the time that the club has been operating various television series made by Jerry Anderson are being made, and all the material relating to those programs has invariably been junked.
Couldn't we smash up some of the equipment or something? Yeah, we could. And the whole thing would probably explode.
I think some of the most exciting items for me that the club's been able to archive are the original scripts from the program. The UFO scripts in particular are very interesting to me. A lot of the early ones that we have were written to a format that was quite different from the program as it ended up, which always helps to give you some idea of the thought processes that went behind actually producing the programs.
Well, I think nowadays it's very easy for a child that's watched an episode of the Power Rangers or He-Man or the Ninja Turtles, when that program's finished, just to whack in a video to watch another couple of episodes that have been taped previously. Of course, during the 60s and early 70s, children didn't have the opportunity to do that. And I know myself that as soon as the latest edition of Captain Scarlet or Joe 90 or Thunderbirds was over, the first thing I'll do would be to rush to the toy box or the toy cupboard and pull out all of my sort of Jerry Anderson toys and reenact the adventures that I'd seen on the TV that week, or create adventures of my own. When I was about 18 or 19, I actually had a job as a messenger in the West End of London, and I happened across a shop that sold a lot of old collectibles, and I picked up an annual that I had as a kid, and it was in mint condition. I thought, it'd be lovely to own this annual again in nice condition, so I bought that. So it was basically over the last sort of 15, 16 years, the bulk of my collection has really built into what it is. And as I say, the pinnacle of that has been the purchase of Melody a couple of years back at an auction. Only the head, sadly, because the body had bit the dust soon after the programme was made.
Well, my entire hobby, this entire thing, started with this Eagle transporter here from Space 1999. As soon as the programme ended, the credits rolled, I thought, got to have an Eagle. Airfix brought the kit out, and I thought it was really good. And about 1980, I went to a convention in London, and I walked into this room, and there were all these models from Space 1999. They were just magnificent. It was fantastic. They were huge, and I just stood there and I looked at this Eagle. It was made out of brass and aluminium, perspex, fiberglass, and all this. And it was just a tremendous piece of work. And I came home, and I looked at this Airfix kit, covered in dust, sitting on the shelf. And I just picked it up and just threw it straight into the bin. I thought, that's garbage, that is. From that point on, I just had to make this stuff and make it properly. Basically, the stuff that I use is wood and plastic and fiberglass. The model that I make now will last me until I die, basically. I can just keep it forever. It's just not going to fall apart. My basic aim is to make a fake, something that looks exactly the same. And I actually sort of achieved that over the last few years. I did a convention once where Jerry Anderson came in to judge the competition. And he literally walked past my models because he thought they were the real thing. And, so I had to drag him back and say, look, this is my model, I entered the competition. And so from that point on, I realised that I'd reached this sort of level where I could sort of fool people into thinking it was real stuff.
I think the appeal of the program is quite simple, that Jerry Anderson himself is a master storyteller.
There is just a magic to these programs, and certainly a magic to Thunderbirds, that I don't think even Jerry Anderson himself could put his finger on as to what it was.
He always seems to deliver the excitement. A lot of science fiction shows, I've watched things for years, they always seem to fail to deliver. If something's going to crash, it'll crash behind the mountain so you don't see it. It's always calm. He'll crash straight into the mountain, it'll just blow to smithereens. So I always knew that if I watched the Jerry Anderson show, I'd be entertained.
Why did dinosaurs become extinct? Quantum Leaps investigates next on BBC Two. And over on BBC One now, the Cause, Tamperer and the Mavericks are top of the top.